my friends. Lori Ashcraft here again. I'm your host for Viva La Evolution, which is sponsored by Recovery and Resilience Solutions, a training and consulting branch of Crestwood Behavioral Health. And also, you'll notice we have two lovely sponsors, Rutgers University and the Alliance. We're very happy that they're supporting us in our efforts. And if this is the first time you're joining us, just give you a quick little summary of what we're all about, what this podcast is focused on. We wanted to be a place where you just didn't come and listen, but where we could really think through some tough issues and identify the things that are working well so we can all do more of them. And then have the courage to identify the things that aren't working so well, so together we can start to fix them. So the more voices, the better. And if you were to go back and listen to other past podcasts, you'd find people that don't agree with each other. And that's great, because we want to talk to everybody. We want to get all the voices involved, because it's through that level of authentic collaboration that we can arrive at the best solutions. So that's what we're about. And by the way, if you would subscribe, that would help us out a lot. And you'll get noticed each time we do a new podcast that way. I don't want you to miss us, and we don't want to miss you either. Today, I'm just so happy to have a wonderful old friend join us, Paolo Del Vecchio. Paolo has been with Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, known as SAMHSA, for almost 30 years. And during that 30 years, he has made a remarkable contribution to the whole recovery process. And Paolo is one of us. Paolo is a peer. And he's going to tell us a little bit about his recovery story. And something I didn't realize is he got his first job at SAMHSA as a result of peer advocacy. Like a group of peers went and sat out in front of a building and said, we want representation in this decision-making process. And that's where it all began. So advocacy works. Wow. Okay, here we go. Let's hear from Paolo. And I'll be putting some stuff in the blog for you for more information. And yeah, I'm going to put a lot of stuff up so you can find this amazing material he's talking about easily and use it. And it's not just reading about it. You can get technical assistance on how to put it into place. So, all right, my friends, here we go. Let's talk to Paolo. Paolo, thank you so much for taking the time to spend a few minutes with us today. I know you're really busy, and I really appreciate it. I know a little bit about the changes that have happened at SAMHSA and the new things you're doing there, but I'd really like to take advantage of your time and have you explain some of those to our viewers, because I'm pretty sure all of us don't know everything about what's going on. But before we get into that, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your own recovery story.
Sure, happy to share a little bit. But first, let me take my appreciation for the opportunity to be here with you, Lori. We have worked many years, going back many years. And,
many.
Appreciate your leadership in many ways in terms of advancing recovery. I'm excited to be here, particularly to talk about the work of the Office of Recovery and SAMHSA. But I will start with a little bit just about the short version, at least, of my journey, my path of recovery. And I'll just start that, like for many of us, I trace my mental health and addiction issues to early childhood trauma that I experienced. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was domestic strife, substance use in the household, and as a child taking that in, experiencing fear and uh, depression and anxiety as a result of those feelings. And in the third grade, teachers saw that I was experiencing these conditions, and they told me to took me out of the classroom to talk to a school psychologist.
Mm.
It wasn't bad really talking to that school psychologist, but what was bad was the reaction of my peers, my fellow students on the bus ride home. What are you, crazy, psycho? What's wrong with you? And that was my first taste of what we called, right, social exclusion or stigma, prejudice associated with these conditions. And that turned me away from seeking services for 2 decades. Why would I want to have everything to do with seeking care?
Yeah.
This, in fact, was going to be the outcome. And instead, like many young people, deal with the pain that I was experiencing, turned to addictions to help self-medicate. And so, alcohol certainly was a prime substance, and drinking grain alcohol before school, taking any kind of substance, frankly, I could get my hands on to dull the pain and the anguish that I was experiencing during those times. Also, I was bullied almost on a daily basis in elementary through high school. As a result, particularly of the addictions, being taken away in the back of police cars and handcuffs. And again, much of my story is not unique. Often criminalization, accompanies that condition. But for me, transition age period, and for many of us, right, the 18 to 25-year period is the hardest. And that was the case for me, and I found myself without any meaning in my life, without any sense of hope, without a friend in the world, without a job, and without a purpose in life. And I made a decision, in fact, to end my life because I didn't feel my life had any kind of meaning or future. And so I found myself, and this was, I identified a day as October the 11th, 1984. And found myself on a subway platform ready to end my life. And the thought of my mom pulled me back from that ledge. And my mom, I consider the heroine of my life. She was someone who had serious mental illness, was stayed hospitalized multiple times, went on to raise 4 kids by herself. Degree in philosophy, taught for many years at a community college, nationally published poet, community activist. But anyhow, thought of her pulled me back from that ledge. I went to a counseling center that was close by, told them I was in crisis. They said, come back in 30 days. We have an opening then, right? How many times people turned away?
Yeah.
Oftentimes due to lack of resources, right? As a critical factor. But what I found in that counseling center changed my life, and that was a sign. It was literally a sign in the door of the program for a job. And it was a job at a local mental health agency, nonprofit, doing an information referral that we call a warm line today. I found 3 things through that job. One is I found I wasn't alone, that there was a community out there of peers and people who experience these conditions. Second thing I found was the power of peer support. And that how making that connection with others and finding those role models that I could in fact succeed. And then also the fact, as we know, in peer support, when we help others, we also help ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? That's the sense of community and purpose that gives us. And the other thing I found was that recovery was possible. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
There was
And back in the 80s, was this still in the 80s, Paolo?
This was in the 80s. So
Yeah.
this was in the mid 80s when I was when I really began my life's work, frankly, in terms of mental health and addiction. From those experiences, I trace it back to.
Well, and to say that you realized you could recover in the 80s is amazing because it didn't start becoming like popular until the 90s, it seemed to me. We started talking about recovery.
Of course, folks like Howie the Harp were at it even a decade before, right, in the early 1960s.
Yeah.
I mean, that would go back there. I was fortunate to be, at that mental health agency where my mentor, Joe Rogers, in fact, started his work in the early to mid 80s. So, I was blessed to be able to work at that effort in Philadelphia that we had Project Share, which was really groundbreaking.
Yeah. I didn't realize that he was a mentor to you, but I'm so glad he was. That explains a lot. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that part of your story. And I guess we could say the rest is history. Because of your commitment and the excellence of your work, you just kept rising to higher levels of responsibility and influence. And you've been at SAMHSA for a long time, maybe 20 some years?
Yeah, I just celebrated my 29th anniversary, in fact.
Oh, wow.
In February. So,
Yeah.
it's been a long career. I'll say, I have to acknowledge, Lori, that the efforts, of course, those that come before us.
Yeah.
And the reason that I started at SAMHSA was because a group of advocates staged a sit-in in the office of then Center for Mental Health Services Director Bernie Ahrens.
Huh.
And in fact, I have a letter that Bernie wrote to those advocates, including Sylvia Harris and others, that he pledged as a result of that action to hire someone to work on recovery and people with lived experience work. And so I ultimately applied for that job, and it was because of the actions of those individuals that I have been able to succeed here.
Advocacy works. Yeah, that's great. That's great. I really came to appreciate you so much when I was on the advisory board for SAMHSA for a few years and just got to be directly under your influence and leadership and see all that you had to deal with and manage and still maintain your humility and connection to the rest of us who were still struggling around with our various labels and so forth. So that was a wonderful time for me to get to know you.
I appreciated your years of service on our National Advisory Council, and of course your ongoing leadership throughout our review.
I was hoping we could talk a little bit about some of the, let's start with talking a little bit about your office and what you're responsible for. And then let's talk about specific programs, especially the new ones. They sound so interesting.
Sure. Well, let me share a little bit about our national recovery agenda.
Oh, good.
The Office of Recovery, we're still relatively new. I mean, for me, this is so exciting work because this is the first ever federal office that's dedicated to recovery like this.
Yeah.
And again, through leadership here at SAMHSA and our Assistant Secretary, Dr. Miriam Delphin-Rittman, and our Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary, Tom Fredere, also person that, it's their vision in terms of creating this particular office. And so we convened a recovery summit meeting in August of 2021. And then we spent the next year in consultation with recovery leaders from around the country. And then we kind of officially launched with staffing, and I was named the director in September, Recovery Month of first, 2022. So we're only about a year and a half old at this point. But we, through that kind of deliberative process, with the recovery community, we identified 5 key priorities for us to work on. And the first priority being inclusion and the need of nothing about us without us. The essential importance, of course, of involving people with lived experience in all aspects of the behavioral health care system. And so we started this by looking in our own backyard and at SAMHSA and how SAMHSA can be a model. And last June, we issued a formal policy about setting the expectation for the full inclusion of people in recovery and family members as in all that we do. And we say all that we do, we mean things like our grants and contracts, to the meetings that we convene, to our staffing. And so, we've identified here through a survey that we conducted last summer that there are about 20% of employees in SAMHSA who identify as being in recovery. We have about 800 employees right now, so that's about 150 staff. So think about that. When I started almost 30 years ago, I was the first sole person, right? 150, that's progress. So first goal, inclusion. When we talk about inclusion, of course, we also mean social inclusion, the ways that we can overcome what's been called stigma. Here we have a whole suite of work that we're focused on. We're getting ready to launch in just about a week's time an effort called the Art of Recovery. And this is an effort where people will submit visual art depictions of their journeys of recovery.
Oh, great.
Yes, and so really to both showcase the amazing talents, of course, the people in recovery have, but also to promote greater understanding and acceptance of those of us with these conditions.
Is this linked to Photo Voice? I worked with BU around Photo Voice for a few years. Is it linked to that?
It's a similar effort. This is going to be both visual arts of people's depictions as well as photography.
Okay, yeah.
Both are included, actually. We have categories for youth and adults, and then we're going to have what we're calling a Gallery of Hope. For September, we're having an online gallery where we're going to showcase this work to the nation during Recovery Month. So we're excited about that. So that's one thing we're doing. Second, we're also planning for Recovery Month a new awards program. And so you may recall, Lori, our Voice Awards in years past. And we're resurrecting that work in a slightly different way. This is smaller in scale, not necessarily Hollywood focused, but this is an effort to recognize recovery champions from around the country. We call these awards the STAR Awards. That stands for SAMHSA Trailblazers to Advance Recovery. So that's going to happen September 24th at the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Look for nominations for those awards also to come out within the next month. Third major thing we're doing in terms of Recovery Month is we're organizing our second annual National Walk for Recovery. So last year we did our inaugural one. It was the hottest day of the year, I'll add. But this year, in partnership with Faces and Voices Recovery and other recovery organizations, we'll be walking in downtown Washington to the Washington Monument to, again, raise public awareness about the reality of recovery. And So that's all about our first goal. We only got through one goal there.
That's all about inclusion then.
That's all about inclusion.
Okay, great.
So I can go on to the second goal, which is
Yeah.
equity. And the need here, particularly to improve recovery for all, frankly, and improve recovery opportunities, particularly to underserved and under-resourced populations, people of color, LGBTQI populations, rural veterans, and others. Couple of things to note that we've been working on here. First was a tribal recovery summit. And it
Hmm.
was the first ever gathering of tribal members to focus on recovery. We had 300 people in Dallas last year. And we came out of that with a whole series of recovery resources to tribal members, creating a tribal recovery resource webpage, in fact, on our
Ah.
page.
Oh, that's great to know that.
We also just launched recently a new technical assistance project that we call the Spark. And
Oh, I think that's what Matt was telling me about.
yes, so that we love our acronyms, of course, in government. So Spark stands for SAMHSA Program to Advance Recovery Knowledge.
Hmm.
This is a technical assistance center, particularly to focus on recovery and equity in ways that we can really bring recovery to larger numbers of folks who are often not served through recovery support services.
So
So
if sometimes I think us guys out here on the West Coast or even maybe in the middle sometimes feel like the things that SAMHSA does happens on the East Coast. And it seems, I mean, it's really not far away given everything. But I, I don't see us getting that connected and involved as we could be, or taking advantage of the resources
you
as well.
know, it's all about knowledge and getting information out. One of the things we have people based now, particularly with our hybrid workforce around the nation. So Itera Islami Templin from Alameda County and statewide in California, longtime peer leader. Brought her aboard, cited, I guess she's actually been with us for almost 6 months. So one of her responsibilities is as a liaison to Region 10, which we're California. That's, for instance, and we have regional liaisons to each of the 10 HHS regions as part of our office. And part of this really is to, promote equity, because we want to make sure that the entire nation, in fact, gets information they need to expand recovery support services. So we're doing rural, for instance, a rural recovery TA effort coming up. This coming month, we're doing in San Francisco an LGBTQI plus in recovery meeting. So there's a couple of our other equity focused.
That's great. I'm so happy to hear about those regional things.
Yeah, we think that's going to really again help in both information share, but also to kind of be communication back. So if there are issues that are coming up, we can hear about it. Third goal, Lori, is around peer services, of course. And as you know, and thanks to your leadership, given the explosion in the peer workforce, in particular, it's been so exciting. And so we've been hard at work. Of course, we released last June the National Model Standards for Peer Support Certification.
Yes, I liked those too. And you know me, I'm pretty picky.
In the wake of those standards, we've seen a number of states revise their certification processes.
Good.
We've seen, in fact, some private health insurers even pledge to bring peer workforce as part of their employer-sponsored healthcare packages and using our peer standards to stand those up. That's a real game changer.
That's really good. Yeah, that's
really exciting. We also saw this past summer, or past fall rather, our colleagues at the Centers for Medicaid and Medicare Services issued the first Medicare regulations to begin reimbursing peer support for workforce
Yeah,
efforts.
it's good.
So we have a lot going on in that space,
Yes, yeah, you really do.
and it's so exciting to see this.
It is. I just want to take a second to tell you, because this will really excite you. I do a lot of work with Crestwood Behavioral Health, and they have quite a few locked facilities, and the people in them are on conservatorship. And this is something the counties just really ask for, and Crestwood often asks if they can do other kinds of programs, and the counties kind of say, we really like these locked things. So Crestwood brought us in to do peer training with those folks who are in a locked facility and on conservatorship. And we've graduated several classes already, most successfully in the San Diego program. So they've completed the 80-hour training. They've completed the 120-hour internship, which was paid by Crestwood. And many of them are employed now by Crestwood. So I think if you can go to a locked program with people on conservatorship and train peer support specialists and hire them, if you can do it there, you can do it anywhere. And
Well, we're seeing, behind other locked doors, so jails and prisons, right? The number of peers getting hired, and looking at models, right? And here, like in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Virginia, just to name three.
yeah.
Close by, we're seeing, particularly given the need, the trauma, right? Again, coming back to that for people who are in justice involved, we're in a locked setting anywhere.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's where certainly peer support can play such an important role.
Yeah. We trained a lot of peers in Pennsylvania prisons a few years ago. Well, it's been like 12 years ago now, but I think we trained in every one of their prisons. And it was, of all the trainings I've done, that was the most significant, seeing those folks come to life and have hope and find purpose. It's so touching.
The other thing I'll just say, and speaking of Pennsylvania, I was just on another podcast earlier, but the work that they're doing, I think they said at least 19 counties right now on youth peer support.
Oh, great.
And being able to get reimbursed for youth peer support. Again, that's only about a third of their counties, but it's exciting to see, youth family as well, family support providers, seeing peers getting hired in school settings, and within neonatal intensive care units. Peers working with moms and dads in those settings. So it's really exciting times.
Let me ask you this, because I could get even more excited about this. When I've done youth peer things, we get right up to hiring, and the Medicare rules are that you can't be hired if you're under 18. Are you saying that in Pennsylvania now they've gotten around that and they can hire people with
I think the youth is probably over the age 18. I don't know.
Okay. Well, I'm still excited, but I'm not as excited as I could be. I'd love to see us go down a little bit in age.
The other thing I will note in terms of at least the youth work, and that gets to the next goal, which is on social determinants of recovery.
Okay, good.
So for this goal, of course, housing, employment, and education. So we've been focused on a few things here. One around schools, and so our office, we take a Big Ten approach with mental health and addictions. People in recovery and family members, all part of our particular focus.
Yeah, that's good.
So there are a number of collegiate recovery programs across the nation, along with recovery high schools. which are for people in recovery from substance use conditions, in particular, creating that supportive peer-based community for youth, for instance. And then college campuses, we're just seeing an explosion in terms of youth voice and
Yeah,
youth
yes.
peer support activities happening. And so those are a couple areas that we have targeted technical assistance. We have another resource that I want to make sure you and the listeners know about, and that's the Peer Recovery Center of Excellence. And so go to the website peerrecoverynow.org. This particular resource center has done a great deal of work looking at peer support services, particularly for folks with substance use conditions. Where the work working with collegiate recovery and recovery schools is happening. And so that's a great resource. Part of their work, Lori here, is also helping us to count the number of peers that we have working across the United States. It's been a challenge for us, right? Because the Department of Labor doesn't have that.
Yeah.
But what we have done is undertaken a survey of the number of certified peers in each state. Just a proviso, because if you're certified, as you know, it doesn't mean you're going to be working necessarily.
Right. Well, and also there's a bunch of peers that working that haven't been certified.
Exactly. So, but at least this is a proxy. And what numbers we're showing are, and we don't have they're soon to be released the complete accurate number, but over 70,000.
Oh, isn't that heartwarming?
That's like more than double our previous estimates.
Huh.
And so, the growth in this work is just amazing. The other thing, just in terms of peer workforce, I'll mention here, Lori, as well, is, we know folks need a living wage.
Oh, right. That's been an issue.
And so one of the things we did issue recently was a report that looked at financing peer recovery support services. And it showed the Medicaid reimbursement rates for each state. And so I encourage, again, your listeners and viewers to check that resource out, available on our website, SAMHSA, SAMHSA.gov. And, great variability in terms of what states are reimbursing and then paying people, right?
I saw some of those figures a while back, and I was amazed at the range.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The second issue, first, that's really important is having a recovery-friendly workplace for your workforce. And here again, our standards really discuss the need for supervisors in particular, right, to be trained and well-versed. In fact, we recommended that peers play the role of supervisors.
Yes, great.
Settings. So, speaking of employment and peer workforce, that's another area of focus for us. So we're doing an employment summit this coming summer. We've been working with our colleagues in the Office of National Drug Control Policy on, in fact, a recovery-ready workplace effort that's happening in a number of states and in corporate entities across the country.
Is that available now, Paolo? That material on?
It is in fact. So
on your website?
There's a recovery-ready workplace toolkit on the U.S. Department of Labor's website.
Okay, I'll put that. We'll put that on the screen so people can.
Okay, and I could follow up with an email with a link to that.
Okay, that'd be
but
good.
that's an exciting effort. And then around housing, and say this time and time again, the data is really clear about the impact that housing has on well-being.
Huge, yeah, huge.
But one area we've been focusing on is recovery housing as an approach. And last September, we released best practices in recovery housing to assist states and communities to stand up recovery housing that's effective and also is helpful for the residents of those facilities. So in addition to that work, we have meeting we convened last summer between Housing First and recovery housing providers to look at ways of collaborating and expanding both approaches. We have a interdepartmental work group that we formed with HUD, Housing and Urban Development, that look at ways of expanding housing options, including recovery housing as a focus. And then our final goal here, Lori, is wellness. And so looking at ways that we can live longer, healthier lives. So we're doing work here, for instance, in shared decision making, expanding those models. The work with the Copeland Center particularly is looking at updating our Taking Action series of guides to assist folks in doing wellness planning and self-care management for their own wellness. And
But
so
I've had that doors to well-being for a long time, so I would think that would fit right into what they're already doing quite nicely.
exactly, and you know, I have to give Matthew and Doris about well-being credit. They've been undertaking some really great work, including on youth peer support, for instance, and
Oh, good, yeah.
Spanish language peer support. Doing some really exciting work. Those are our 5 goals: inclusion, equity, peer workforce, social determinants, wellness. We also focus on trauma, focus on rights issues, and also data and evidence. And let me just say a word about the data and evidence one, because that's also really exciting efforts. One is we released last year a report that looked at data that we have in our National Survey of Drug Use and Health that asks Americans lots of questions about mental health and addictions. And one of the questions we ask is, are you in recovery? For the first time ever, we reported out on that data, and what that showed was that fully 7 in 10, about 70% of individuals who said they've had a mental health or substance use problem in the past identify as being in recovery of that.
Wow, that's really interesting.
So that really does say, recovery should be the expectation for
yes,
the
yes.
care system. And in fact, that, look at these numbers, that translates into 58 million Americans in recovery.
Huh.
So there are a lot of us.
That's amazing. It takes me back to the New Freedom Commission. I think that was around 2012 or something. And I think Dan Fisher was on that commission, and I attribute him the credit for getting the commission to say recovery is possible. And that was such a step. Like, I mean, it was just such a far out goal to set, it seemed at the time. And then here we are, what you're saying, it's like it's happening.
Yeah, now we're really, key is ramping up the recovery support services in communities so that all people, frankly, can have access to the kind of things that have helped me and so many others. Those peer recovery support services, how having health, home, purpose, and community. All those key elements that we identify as in recovery. That's why this particular work really is exciting here. We're working with very closely with states in terms of adopting these efforts, and we see, Lori, the old adage that from crisis there's opportunities.
Yes, yeah.
Right. So for this nation, with overdose epidemic that we've experienced, 110,000 people lost last year, with continued rising rates in mental health distress and suicide being the top leading cause of early mortality among youth, that, through these crises, there is opportunities to advance effective recovery support services that really promote healing and hope for people. And so that's the goal of our particular
I love that goal. I think, it just calls on us to constantly um, be more creative and find new ways to solve new problems. We can't just keep going back to the old tried and true. We have to, or tried and not, they're not so, maybe not so true anymore.
But one of the things, in terms of models in particular, I'm really excited about are peer-run crisis respite programs.
Yeah.
And this with a lot of focus on crisis care, right? And we've seen overuse, frankly, of emergency rooms and inpatient care that's not necessarily needed when people can get support through things like peer crisis respite programs
Yeah.
that are trauma informed and focus on recovery. So, a couple recently, I had an opportunity to visit Promise Resource Networks peer respite in Charlotte, North Carolina, and what an amazing facility that is. And they serve folks who are primarily unhoused, but they also serve folks like they were sharing law enforcement officers and teachers who want to get traditional care because they fear that, it might impact their careers.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But, we're seeing peer-run crisis respite being set up in many communities to give people options, right?
Yes.
Options. And we are undertaking and going to be releasing here soon a survey that we conducted with peer-run respite programs that looks at things like the services that they offer, as well as financing and things like that. So we're excited about that particular model.
Yeah, that's great. But we're having Shireen on in a couple weeks to talk about her program because
that's the one I visited.
Oh yeah, I think she's doing some really remarkable work, and Crestwood is getting ready to open a crisis respite. So I've really pointed them at what Shireen's doing because I love the work she's doing there.
Just in fact, I'm sure describing this, I'm sure just opened up a second respite in their training as well. They're doing a lot of great work.
Yeah. So if people, all these amazing things you've told us about Paolo, if people want to find out more about them or access them or implement them, they would go to the website. Is there any technical assistance available for people who might look at the website and go, well, this is great, but what the heck do I do? Is there anything available?
Yeah, we have our Office of Recovery site on SAMHSA's homepage. So if folks go to Office of Recovery at SAMHSA, again, SAMHSA.gov, we have there a list of resources and technical assistance
Okay.
that I mentioned on this call and others that and other reports from these meetings that I was discussed, as well as other resources that people can access just from our website.
Yeah. With all the things you're already doing, they have amazing future implications for good things to happen. But are there hopes and dreams beyond what you're doing that you'd like to see, Paolo?
I think, we're just still at the infancy, right? In terms of what peer support and what recovery can help to achieve in the United States and in fact globally as well. And still far too many communities, too many individuals and families who, are not aware of the power of peer support. That, in fact, recovery is possible. And so, my hopes and dreams are to continue to build from these efforts that we've undertaken for several decades here. And it's never a straight road. But it's really exciting at this point to see the alignment with federal, state, and local efforts in terms of promoting recovery-based efforts, but we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah. Well, you're doing amazing things. So thank you for being there, and thank you for holding the light on the need to support the recovery process. I just appreciate you so much for doing that. And for so long, it's one thing to be a flash in the pan, which you have not been. You've been a reliable warrior for a very long time. So
Well,
thank
thank
you.
you, Lori. It takes all of us, right? And
Oh, yeah.
thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today.
Yeah. Well, it's been my pleasure. Thank you. Well, there you have it. A wonderful visit with Paolo Del Vecchio from SAMHSA, giving us lots of information on some wonderful resources we can access and use. And again, with technical support too. So I'm so happy that he was able to join us and that y'all got to hear what's going on at the federal level. And I just want to say, don't be intimidated by this federal stuff. I know, I mean, for us folks on the West Coast anyway, it seems far away and like a voice in the clouds sometimes, but it's available for all of us. We all need to pay attention to what's on that website and use the resources that are available to us. Sorry for the lecture. I'm kind of lecturing myself too. All right, my dears. So long for now, and see you next time.